This might be the century's most significant archaeological breakthrough, because with modern technology, researchers may at last have located Egypt's lost labyrinth. It hasn't been smooth sailing, and there's real pushback against the claim. So let's weigh the evidence and ask, are we on the brink of solving one of ancient history's greatest riddles? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be discussing that AI has just found that shocked scientists about the lost labyrinth of Egypt. We explore the unexplained mysteries of our past. Let's dive in. The lost labyrinth of ancient Egypt has long stood as one of antiquity's toughest puzzles.
I have been working with a number of other people who know a lot more about it than I do. And it's beginning to be clear that the massive, instant, allergic reaction of dismissal that came from all the usual skeptics about the Philippa Biondi's work, that instant rejection, that instant hostility, that instant sneering was yet another example of premature rejection in science. It's too early to reject this idea.
Proudly testified to by the ancients, yet invisible to us now. Before racing ahead, it helps to hear from someone who's been at the center of the public debate, Graham Hancock. His view on new sensing tech is straightforward. Use it, because tools like LiDAR and related methods let researchers probe sites without damaging them. But treat early outputs as provisional and demand more work before anyone makes sweeping claims. He points to satellite-derived results as very interesting, while stressing that real certainty will only come after further validation. He's criticized the instant allergic reaction from routine skeptics who dismissed recent underground structure claims out of hand, arguing that premature rejection is just as unscientific as premature hype. What matters, he says, is to understand the method, compare it with independent techniques, and then test it openly so the data can be validated or invalidated in public. That's the productive path. Let innovative, even brilliant, approaches spark targeted follow-ups and refuse both the rush to coronate and the reflex to sneer. In short, new scans can frame excellent questions. Measured, comparative fieldwork must answer them. For more than 2,000 years, travelers and scholars insisted a vast complex lay beneath Hira. Today we see nothing. So either the ancients indulged in grand exaggeration, or a monumental work of architecture still lies asleep under the sand. Our first major witness is Herodotus. Writing in the 5th century BC, he says he saw the labyrinth with his own eyes and judged it greater than words can say. This is the same man who had marveled at Thebes and the pyramids. Yet he insists the labyrinth eclipsed all great Greek works in both labor and cost. He even declares it surpassed the pyramids in magnificence. Imagine that. An ancient structure not merely rivaling, but outshining the awe-inspiring Giza pyramids, still waiting to be uncovered. In his histories, Herodotus describes 12 roofed courts and 3,000 interlinked rooms. He admits he was barred from the lower level, but priests told him it contained vast underground halls. Above ground, he notes flawlessly fitted white stone columns, carved walls, and a matching stone roof. Then he offers a crucial clue. At one corner of the labyrinth stood a pyramid, joined by an underground passage. Herodotus wasn't alone. Around 25 BC, the geographer Strabo also recorded the Egyptian labyrinth. He echoed Herodotus's awe, calling it a work on par with the pyramids. He emphasized the bewildering plan. Before the entrances there lie hidden chambers, with paths crossing and twisting, so no one can enter or exit any court without a guide. Even as ruins, its maze-like nature was unmistakable. Diodorus Siculus reinforces this. He writes that the famed Cretan maze of King Minos was merely a copy, inspired by Egypt's original. By Diodorus's time, the Cretan imitation had disappeared, but the older Egyptian labyrinth, he states, still stood in flawless condition. Meanwhile, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder also records the labyrinth in his Natural History. Pliny adds an astonishing detail. It was said to have been built more than 3,600 years before his era, a date that would place its origins prior to dynastic Egypt. He marvels that even centuries of weathering and human damage could not erase its immense stonework, a testament to how powerfully it was constructed.
of ancient Egypt. It's the transition from dynastic Egypt into it becoming essentially a Roman province, like an imperial province of Rome. And that runs you up to about 400 or 500 AD. And then sort of civilization we have the Dark Ages, we sort of have Roman Empire collapses. And it's not until, again, you get to the Renaissance and you have artists and other authors are looking at these historical accounts and they're talking about it, they're drawing it. Some of the depictions you see from the labyrinth are in that.
Public curiosity about Egypt's hidden structures didn't start on YouTube. It exploded in mainstream talk shows as well. On long-form platforms like the Joe Rogan Experience, guests have argued that legacy institutions often dismiss non-invasive discoveries until those same methods get official approval. The theme is familiar. Satellite and muon scans can reveal voids and corridors, but without sanctioned excavation, the conversation stalls. That stalemate mirrors the labyrinth story exactly. Ancient writers describe a build equal to or beyond the pyramids, while modern tools hint at massive, ordered features beneath Hira. Skeptics frame the scans as artifacts of noise or modeling. Technologists answer that independent techniques are converging on the same geometry. Both sides agree on one point. Only a carefully managed excavation can break the deadlock. In other words, the debate people hear on popular shows is not about personalities. It's about process. How to move from promising signal to undeniable structure. Bring that lens here, and the labyrinth stops being legend versus fantasy. It becomes a test case for modern archaeology. Align multimodality scans, control for groundwater, and ground truth the grids. That's the scientific path forward. And if the classical descriptions hold up, it would resolve one of antiquity's most stubborn mysteries with 21st century clarity. From these ancient witnesses, a picture forms of an extraordinary subterranean complex. All accounts agree on the massive scale, the countless rooms, and the bewildering plan. Yet the questions of who built it and for what purpose remained unresolved. The core dilemma is stark. Either generations of Greek and Roman authors collectively imagine the same thing, or a vast, precision-engineered complex still lies below, exactly where they said it would be. Jump ahead to the 18th and 19th centuries, when European expeditions began examining Egypt's ancient sites. In 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign brought a corps of scholars and engineers who surveyed the Hira region closely. In the monumental Description del Egypti, 1821, they identified ruins beside the pyramid of Amen in Hat the Thursday and argued these were the remnants of the legendary labyrinth, effectively the first modern proposal for its precise location. As the 1800s unfolded, determined archaeologists continued making their way to Hira to test the claim. In 1843, British explorers Sir John Gardner Wilkinson and Sir Howard Vyse both visited and reported that extensive brick remained south of the pyramid might belong to the labyrinth's debris. Around the same period, the Prussian Egyptologist Carl Richard Lepsius exposed a sequence of puzzling brick chambers and walls. He became persuaded that he had identified the true labyrinth. The most decisive advance, however, came through the work of William Flinders Petrie, the renowned British Egyptologist. In 1888, Petrie set out for Hira determined to solve the labyrinth's fate once and for all. By then the landscape was a tangle. Heaps of debris, later mud brick village walls, scattered stone blocks, and a medieval canal slicing across the ground. Working systematically, Petrie cleared and surveyed the site, and soon recognized that the brick buildings Lepsius noted were not the labyrinth itself, but a later Greco-Roman settlement. With those upper layers separated, Petrie turned to what lay below. He eventually struck a colossal bed of limestone chips and rubble, a classic signature of heavy quarrying. Within this great bed of chips, as he called it, Petrie exposed segments of an enormous stone platform or foundation. When he measured it, the footprint came out to nearly 1,000 by 800 feet, truly vast. Crucially, those dimensions aligned strikingly with the scale implied by Herodotus. In effect, Petrie had revealed the labyrinth's outline. What Petrie did not uncover were preserved halls or standing walls. The superstructure had vanished, seemingly dismantled in antiquity. He concluded that the labyrinth stone had been quarried away long ago by Egyptians or later authorities. By 1889, Petrie believed the story was clear. The Hira labyrinth had been real, and its gigantic foundations could be mapped. Time and human activity had stripped away its glory, leaving only traces for scholars to study. His published conclusions strongly shaped the modern view. Hawar's labyrinth, while once extraordinary, was effectively lost, reduced to a stone footprint and scattered fragments. Now, back to the video. For most of the 20th century, Petrie's conclusions went largely unchallenged. The Great Labyrinth was gone, dismantled in antiquity. But in the early 21st century, a new wave of researchers began to suspect that more might still survive. In 2008, the ambitious Matahar expedition set out to re-examine Hora with modern tools. Led by Belgian researcher Louis de Cordier and joined by scientists from the Egyptian National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, the team secured permission from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, then headed by Dr. Zahi Hawass, to conduct a non-invasive survey. Their plan used ground-penetrating radar and other geophysical methods to search for structural remains of the labyrinth below the surface. What the Matahar expedition reported was astonishing. Scanning the area south of the pyramid, exactly where Petrie had marked foundations, the team detected clear signs of man-made features deep underground. The subsurface data showed patterns resembling walls, chambers, and cavities arranged in a regular, grid-like layout. In essence, the radar sketched an enormous geometric structure 8 to 12 meters down, consistent with the labyrinth's expected footprint. The scans indicated rows of large rooms and stone partitions, some zones forming a vast rectangular grid. Around 10 meters deep, the team identified what might be a continuous floor or roof, possibly the very slabs Petrie had touched, with voids beneath. Material signatures resembled dense stone, perhaps granite, suggesting deeper levels could still be intact and composed of heavy stone elements. In other words, the 2008 results implied Petrie had only grazed the surface. What he called a foundation might actually have been a roof to the labyrinth's lower tier, with whole corridors and rooms sealed below. If verified, this would align with ancient accounts that much of the labyrinth lay underground. Herodotus mentioned extensive subterranean halls. Could those still be undisturbed? The Matahar team believed the answer might be yes. Then the narrative took a puzzling turn. Despite the successful survey, no official excavation followed, nor a formal publication from Egyptian authorities. According to Louis de Cordier, the Supreme Council of Antiquities abruptly halted communications about the Hora findings. Zahi Hawass, then Egypt's antiquities chief, reportedly barred further public statements until the data cleared official review. For 2 years, the team waited for approval that never arrived. Feeling blocked, De Cordier created a website in 2010 to share results and build awareness. That unilateral step, by his account, put him at odds with Hawass. Authorities allegedly treated the release of unapproved geophysical data as a breach of protocol, possibly even a national security concern. The practical outcome: no further on-site work was permitted for the team. Thus, a remarkable prospect was left in limbo, enticing yet unconfirmed, and wrapped in controversy. It was, by any measure, a profoundly frustrating impasse. Imagine believing the elusive lost labyrinth of ancient Egypt had finally been proven, only for public disclosure to be halted by Zahi Hawass. While the 2008 GPR results sat in limbo, other researchers began applying new technology to Hora. Merlin Burrows, a UK-based remote sensing firm, partnered with Tim Akers, a satellite imaging specialist formerly with the UK military, to deploy advanced satellite scanning techniques at the site. Beginning around 2015, Akers analyzed high-resolution multispectral satellite data over the Hora region, and the team's reports were extraordinary. The scans revealed complex subsurface anomalies across the entire labyrinth zone. Their interpretation suggested the complex spans 4 or 5 distinct underground tiers, multiple stacked layers beneath the desert floor, each separated by several meters of sand or rock, resembling an ancient multi-story structure. The imagery showed regular patterns read as colonnaded halls and chambers, some of impressive scale. Overall, the footprint was huge, roughly the size of 10 football fields side by side, aligning with Petrie's measured platform and the immense scale described by classical authors. One finding drew particular attention. Near the center of the buried complex, Akers identified a massive anomalous object unlike any expected signal, about 40 meters long, with a strong metallic signature, as though a large metal artifact or structure lies within a chamber. To a radar-trained eye, it did not resemble natural rock or ordinary masonry. Akers nicknamed the object Dippy, after the famous skeleton in London's Natural History Museum, noting that in various renderings it resembled a giant tic-tac-shaped capsule, or perhaps a large shin ring. Nothing in his extensive underground scanning experience quite matched it. If accurate, this potentially metallic mass would be without precedent in known ancient architecture. A separate concern at Hawera, water damage, also received tentative good news. The Merlin Burrows data indicated that while the upper few meters are waterlogged, deeper levels appear dry and preserved. The detected chambers, including whatever Dippy may be, sit in hollow, dry spaces below the water table. If the lower galleries remain intact, bedrock may have protected and sealed them from intrusion, raising the possibility that inscriptions, sculptures, or other delicate materials could have survived untouched since antiquity. Popular conversations often frame Egypt's underground mysteries as a clash. Bold scanning claims on one side, cautious gatekeeping on the other. But the real story at Hawera is narrower and more measurable. Multiple non-invasive datasets, historical GPR/VLF/resistivity surveys, plus later space-based analyses, independently report-ordered, rectilinear, grid-like anomalies below the known plaster/chips stratum south of the pyramid. That pattern is not a random patchwork. It's a repeating geometry at depths consistent with a multi-level Even if interpretations differ, that core agreement is the point. It's why mainstream hosts keep returning to Egypt. They sense when separate tools start saying the same thing. Still, extraordinary claims demand phase-by-phase verification. The right sequence looks like this. 1. Resurvey the same polygons with today's calibrated instruments. 2. Publish open data and parameter files. 3. Drill microcores at pre-registered coordinates outside heritage fabric. 4. Bring in dewatering engineers to model the shallow aquifer and canal influence. 5. Open limited ground windows under conservation protocols. That pipeline is slow, public, and boring. And that's exactly why it works. If deeper voids are genuinely dry, the risk to inscriptions and architectural finishes drops, and the probability of intact galleries rises. If not, mitigation comes first. Either outcome is valuable. The popular shows serve a role here. They keep attention on the question long enough for careful work to happen. The danger isn't enthusiasm, it's skipping steps. At Hawera, the path is clear. Converge methods, pre-register hypotheses, accept falsification, and let the ground decide. Should those rectangular grids resolve into walls, courts, and stairs on a measured plan, the result wouldn't just vindicate classical testimony. It would add a missing chapter to Egyptian architectural history and reset what non-invasive archaeology can do when paired with disciplined excavation. These claims, however, remain unverified in situ. As compelling as they sound, they warrant cautious optimism. Remote sensing can yield false positives or be misinterpreted. 5 stacked levels extending dozens of meters downward would be unprecedented in Egyptian construction. And regarding the tic-tac-like anomaly, conclusions remain speculative. Zooming back out, Hancock's larger point is about process. He cautions that archaeology and Egyptology have been flooded for decades with weak or sensational ideas, so professionals often default to automatic dismissal. But that reflex, he argues, can also bury valid leads. A better stance is disciplined agnosticism. Study the exact science behind each method, acknowledge uncertainty, and set up the next tests. In practice, that means replicating surveys with today's calibrated gear, publishing parameters, and inviting independent teams to try to break the result. If the method survives scrutiny, move forward. If not, retire it and record why. He calls the latest underground structure claims an interesting, innovative two-technique approach that deserves precisely this kind of follow-through. Neither embraced nor mocked, simply tested. That's how we move from viral claims to verifiable plans. and from suggestive images to documented architecture. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to learn what the ground is actually telling us. In that spirit, the next chapter of Heuer should be slow, public, and method first, letting careful validation decide whether the rectilinear patterns map to halls, courts, and passages, or to something more mundane. Either way, the discipline improves. And if the deeper voids are real and dry, the odds of preserved inscriptions and finishes rise, exactly the kind of stakes that justify patience over spectacle. Even so, the converging lines of evidence point to something remarkable beneath the sands of Heuer. Ancient testimony, Petrie's mapped remains, and modern scans all align on a simple proposition. The labyrinth was real, and it likely is not entirely lost. Accordingly, Heuer merits a dedicated future excavation, carefully planned and equipped with modern methods. Real challenges exist, managing groundwater and possibly diverting the nearby irrigation canal. Yet these are solvable engineering problems given sufficient will and funding. The potential payoff is immense, not only in artifacts but in knowledge. Confirming the labyrinth's layout would close a major gap in Egyptian architectural history and could mark one of the most important archaeological discoveries of this era. The search continues, and perhaps soon, the labyrinth will no longer be lost.